The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, Season 4, Episode 72, The Daniel Hall Story. This week, you're going to hear about Daniel's journey, how he went from being abused, put into an adoption home, being abused again, finding a parent, a couple that would take him in after, during the interview, he peed on the wall. This is an incredible story of how someone who by society standards should be written off end up in prison or an institution, and yet this man has followed a path because his parents put the hard work and love into him that taught him the importance and love for music, the appreciation and profitability from tech, computers, science, and then it converted him into a man who found love on eHarmony, a dating site, and then through the encouragement of his wife, they adopted and have multiple children now, biological and adopted, and they're one happy family growing, loving each other, loving the world, and glorifying God. So this is a remarkable episode. Unless you're driving, get your pen and paper out, take notes, reach out through the show notes if you have any questions for Daniel or I, and enjoy this remarkable episode now. Hey, Dan, how are you today, brother?
Good morning, Dave. How are you? I'm doing amazing.
Oh, I'm doing remarkable, man. I'm doing remarkable. It's great to have you. I'm glad you reached out through our website and we're having this conversation today. So like our listeners know, they're here to not only hear your story, but to hear what you faced, overcame, achieved, but specifically the practical steps, how they did it, how you did it so they can too. So at this time, man, you can go back to wherever you think significant, start in your childhood, where were you born, raised, what was your upbringing in life, and then bring us through today. And then we're going to transition the show into where is Dan today and where are you going? So after you help us for an hour, then we can transition and learn to help you. So that's it, my friend. I am excited to hear your story, and I know our listeners are too.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Or should I say remarkable? It certainly is. You know, I started what I can remember my life in a foster home in Fairhaven, Vermont. And that foster home, the foster dad especially, was very abusive to my two brothers and I. I had a younger brother that was about a year and a half younger. So he was about 6 months old. I was 2, and my older brother was about 3.5, 4. And we were often, beaten. My younger brother was tied down to his crib. And there were many times where they would, put food, we'd be locked in a room and they would put food out on a table, unlock the room. And then we would have to go out and kind of steal our meals. And then we'd get punished or reprimanded for doing that because we were so hungry. And there were times where my foster dad would shove me up against the wall and he would tell me, "You're nothing but a piece of shit. You won't amount to anything in life and nobody will ever want you." So, David, that is the starting point of where I really remember life. And if you look at the inmates, anybody that's incarcerated, if you look, they have similar characteristics of what my foster parents were starting to give me. And that was having the lack of trust that anybody was going to take care of us. And having a lack of empathy because I felt nothing. I felt nothing for these people. And when you try to bring in that cause and effect thinking, there's no cause and effect thinking there. There's nothing that you can do to change. I mean, I'm ages 2 to 5 at that time, and there's nothing that you can absolutely do to change that trajectory that you're on. And like I said, a lot of your inmates lack empathy. They lack the ability to trust. They don't have that cause and effect thinking. So immediately we were set on that trajectory in life. And my message is that chaos will often breed success, because that chaos that I started out with has placed me into an amazing life that I am in now. And I have my biological father to thank for knowing what his limitations were as a person, knowing that there were 5 of us and my biological mom was having problems with health issues. And so he couldn't take care of 5 of us, especially 3 of us that were 5 and younger. So he put us in a foster home. He didn't know that foster home was going to be abusive. He didn't know that going into it. So I give him kudos for putting me on a path of not only chaos, but on a path of getting to the point where my life was going to be refined and defined by my failures, what I perceived as my failures. And I often say that, on my epitaph, I wanted to read, a man who learned to reciprocate kindness by failing often. So that's kind of how life started, man.
Now, let me ask you a question. You had a childhood that bred success for you, and you learned from it and grew. And we're going to go into that in more depth. But all of us can have a challenge placed before us, and it can either crush us or we can rise from the ashes like a phoenix. What's the difference? What happened inside of you, or how did God lead you that instead of being crushed and given up and you ending up an inmate brought you to this point? And if you're listening, I mentioned in the intro, you're going to hear a lot of noise in the background. That's really exciting to me because Dan's going to get into what that noise is, right? But so how did you go from a background where you should have been in cell block C to where you're at today with a beautiful collage behind you, if people are listening and not watching, of all the art your 6 kids have drawn?
Yeah. So Maggie and Jerry Hall showed up to this home in Fairhaven, Vermont. And I was desperate. I was so desperate. I didn't know what the next step looked like for me. It could be worse abuse than what was already happening, or it could be my salvation. And I wasn't going to take a chance. I just wanted out of there. So I whipped it out and I started peeing all over the wall. It's kind of one way of I learned to self-market myself at a very young age. And the Halls must have thought that I needed the most help. And it was a day or 2 later, they came back and I was out from that home and I was living in Castleton, Vermont with them. And it was hard. I was not easy for them because I didn't have those coping skills, those so needed coping skills that a child needs and has to learn. They were brute forcing it. They had no idea what I was like. My mom and dad often classified me as a holy terror. But the pivotal moment, David, was my mom used to go to her church functions in Castleton, Vermont. And just about an eighth of quarter of a mile up the street was Castleton State College, which is now Castleton University. She would drop me off there at the library, which had a computer center. And I would go in there. I was so fascinated with the computers, and I would just sit there until she was done. It would be 2.5 hours. I would sit there. Somebody showed me how to get on when I was 8 years old, just walk me through. And I just started absorbing it. I would come home with these great big, huge reams of green bar paper. And I would sit down with my mom, Maggie, and she would sit there bored off her ass, bored off her ass. But she would show up, David. She would show up and fill my bucket with so many compliments. That is really amazing. You're so smart. Just all those tiny affirmations that just inspired me to want to keep going back and doing that, because I craved that positive reinforcement from my parents. If you look at where I started and now where I'm at age 8, that's a huge shift in 3 years. They did it. They found what I absolutely it would become the one thing that I absolutely love to do, and that is to write software. And it was an escape for me. It was a complete escape. And it would be about 2 years later, when I was 10, I was in the 5th grade, and my mom and dad got me my first musical instrument, which was a trombone. And that became my second passion. And so I have no idea how my mom and dad did it back in the 70s, but they were so in tune with my needs, and I had no clue what I needed. It would change on a whim, but they figured out what my passions were, and it was computers and music. And that my computer, my software development has carried me to this day. And when you find something that you absolutely love to do and you make that your job, every day you're coming to work and you're having fun. And that is just the best feeling. And that has become, I always thought it was going to be my purpose, but it ended up being my balance, because you hear all the chaos that's going on upstairs. You will hear that. And that's okay. They're just being kids. But I get a little slice of a vacation every day. I get to leave that behind, and I get to come and do something that I absolutely love. And I can't stress how important that is. So you see, in that chaos that I went through, my mom and dad, Maggie and Jerry, helped me find what my passions were. They helped me find eventually what my purpose would become, even though I was so scared and reluctant to have to parent a child like I was growing up. It's such an amazing feeling to look at a young child grow and thrive.
Now, let me ask you a couple of questions. First off, did the Halls adopt you, or you and your other siblings?
My two other siblings, Dave and Ted, aged out of the system. And I was the only one that was adopted. They could only take one of us. They only had the resources. They were amazing. They knew what their limitations were as parents. And they didn't fall into that, oh, there's 3 of them, we have to help all of them. They went within their means and they provided. And
Yeah,
I was adopted when I was 7.
Okay. And did they have other children of their own, or just you?
They did. They had another foster child named Kathy, and then I had 3 other siblings. When I got there, it was Julie and Jerry, and then Kathy was already there. She was a foster child, and then I came to live in the home. And then when I was 11 years old, they had another biological child, Crystal. So Julie and Jerry were biological, and Crystal was biological. So they have 5 total.
Wow. Now, let me ask this question. On our podcast, I think you're going to be episode 72. Don't hold me to that. But season 4, episode 72, that's what's slated. But I don't usually ask questions about other people because that's their story. But this ties so closely to you. and our listeners out there may be adopted. Our listeners out there may be orphaned right now, or they may be thinking about adoption. What did they ever explain to you? Did you ever have the conversation that what was your parents thinking when they saw you? Why did they choose you? Like, what made them want to adopt, and what made them choose a kid peeing on the wall?
It wasn't only peeing on the wall. They could tell that by my behaviors that there was nothing there. I think my mom classified me as an empty child. That I had no idea what I was doing, where I was going. Seemed like he had it together because he was trying to take care of us. And they couldn't take in a baby at the time. Ted was about 3 years old when they took me out of that home, three and a half. And they couldn't, and with the dynamics, 5, I was up walking around, and you got to remember Ted was tied down to his crib, so he didn't get all that exercise. So he wasn't really mobile at that point. So I'm pretty sure it was, and my mom and dad have confirmed that I needed the most help based upon the behaviors that they saw when I was there.
Now, you said, wait, your brother Ted was tied to the crib?
Yeah.
He was younger than you.
He was younger than me, yeah.
So
they would tie him down to the crib.
Yeah, no. But I'm saying, how did he time out of the system? Or your parents just said, we can't handle him at that point? I think I misunderstood earlier.
Yeah. So Ted was tied down to the crib and the room was locked. So you have nobody really there with us interacting, during the day. Some days we'd have people come in and, we'd engage, but there wouldn't be any play. If we wanted to play, we'd reach our hand in and, hi Ted, how you doing? Or we'd give him a toy. But he didn't really have that chance to be out and be mobile, like a normal child should.
Yeah.
So,
and where was he when the Halls saw you?
I don't remember Ted ever being out there.
Got you.
Yeah, okay. And I'm pretty sure that if they did go see Ted, I didn't know about it. But I'm sure, it's an interesting story there because my social worker would eventually become an influential senator in the state of Vermont, Alice Nitka, and she was amazing. I don't know if she, they went. I know they went to different places in the house, but I don't know, if they ever saw Ted. I would have to make an assumption that they must have saw all 3 of us.
Yeah, I mean, you're only 7. I know you don't have all the answers, but
well, I was five at the time when they showed up.
Okay, yeah, and I just thought I heard you say that your other siblings were older and they timed out of the system. I just misunderstood.
Yeah, one was a year and a half younger. One was about a year and a half, 2 years older. My brother Dave is older and Ted is younger, and they aged out of the system.
Got you. But not at that point. You were all in the system at that point.
Right. And I was adopted by the Halls when I was 7. So they moved through their whole life, never being adopted. 18, they aged out.
Got you. But at that point, the Halls didn't take them because they either didn't see them or they knew what they could handle. They were going to take you, and then that's what they could handle. Awesome. Okay. And that's a great point for our listeners. Don't take on more than you can handle, especially with a life. This isn't like a puppy and you can give it away. This is a human that loves you and you need to love them. So, all right, man. Well, you're going through this as a child, and even though you have a loving family now, I'm sure there's a lot of baggage and things you got to deal with. Talk about, as you grew up as a child with the Halls, what did you have to deal with and how did you overcome those obstacles?
Sure. And a lot of that a lot of the challenges that came about were just wanting to belong as a person, trying to look, I was big and fat. when I was younger. And, back in the 70s, there's still a lot of racism and stuff going on. Not really that had an impact on me as a child, but people were mean. They were still mean and still, four eyes, and that still happens today. But with that negativity, that I don't think people ever realize that pushed me back into my triggers of being nothing but a piece of shit. And all that, not of them not knowing what that story was as children, as kids. I don't blame them for any of that. I just wish that they understood what my story was at that point in time, to know how much they were actually impacting me as a child. Because that anger that builds up in you, because you have to let that out somewhere. I was an angry kid. I still have scars on my hands from when I was a child. I used to push or punch my fist through windows and break windows, and just have some really, really severe anger issues that I know my mom really spent a lot of time with me getting me to calm down. Maggie was just a saint to help me through what that brainwashing had done to me, early on.
Do you
And
remember some of the, there's parents listening now that have children struggle with anger. Do you remember by any chance that, I mean, she may have done stuff so natural that it was just second nature now, but do you remember anything that she did specifically that helped you learn balance?
she always just showed up for me. And, subliminally, that I think transferred into how I parent our kids today, how we parent our kids. And what I mean by that, and my mom was so patient with me. My dad was disciplinarian, and my mom was the one that was there trying to bring out the best in all of us. And they were such a great balance. I look at and this is, I'm trying to answer your question, but I'm just fast forwarding a little. Later on in life, I always thought my dad was a hard ass on me, because he was the disciplinarian. And when I got to 40, when we got our first placement of two little girls, it clicked. I saw myself in their eyes immediately as a child, with all the trauma, the lying, the stealing. And I was overwhelmed with emotions of how my dad must have just felt, and the pain he must have felt, and all the failure that he must have felt, and my mom felt, because I don't think they ever realized what they had done, at least until I was 40. But the one key ingredient, Dave, was that they showed up, and they were always there. Hey, look, we can fail. We can fail as parents, but is it really truly failure? It's not, because you are there. And my parents did this to me, but it took me 40 years to realize that. They felt like they were being kicked down, dragged out, whatever you want to call it. But the next day they showed up and they were still there. They were still my parents. And every day back then was a new day. So they would leave all the crap behind that happened the day before, and they would get a new day going with me. Hey, buddy, let's do this today. Let's do this today. Or let's work on this today. And it was generally my mom. And I know my dad would be hemming and hawing, because he's my dad and he's an amazing man. And he was my mom's balance, and my mom was his balance. So that relationship, that solid relationship that they had, and their communication skills are really the key ingredients that live on with me today. And I find that they have become my success. Those communication skills and those forgiveness skills have really been a key factor of who I am today. Even though I went through life a long time in life not really giving a shit about anybody or anything. But it just, when I saw those two little girls that were traumatized by their biological parents and step parents, it was just a real huge paradigm shift in my thinking.
Now, you mentioned communication skills and forgiveness skills. What are some things they taught you that, like, okay, somebody harms you, you're devastated, you're injured, it's a trigger for all the pain of your past. What are the steps Dan goes through to regain balance?
I tell this to my kids today, and I think we all have heard this. I know you are, but what am I? That's what my mom would tell me. I always flip it back on them, and sometimes that would get me in trouble. So, if somebody calls you fat, I know you are, but what am I? Somebody calls you four eyes, and I do that to my kids, and they're using it against each other today. But it's their coping mechanism. It's their way of just throwing something back, and it's something as simple as that. But sometimes that would get me in trouble because that person would be bigger and would probably end up beating the crap out of me. But it just gave me a sense of, okay, that I'm not going to let that bother me. And there was a lot of times where my mom was like, just don't get into a fight. Try to learn to communicate and talk your way out. Well, I didn't really get to practice that much because I really didn't have any friends. I had a few friends, John Wright, Steve Sullivan, that were really, and Joe Lane, that were my, just good friends in high school. And I really didn't get a chance to talk to anybody else. But my mom and dad, with the kindness piece of it, my mom went to church, and I think church really had an impact in my life. I am not a practicing churchgoer now, but I always balance my decisions in the eyes of God. And I know that making the right choices is something that is healthy for my soul. And I learned that through my mom. My dad wasn't really a churchgoer, but he's an amazing man. But it was really, just being in the eyes of God when I was younger, even though I hated it. I hated going to Sunday school, and I spent a lot of time stealing money from my parents to go to the store before Sunday school and buy all kinds of candy so I could buy my friends. And, that worked out great, until my parents found out I was stealing money. But, that layer of forgiveness was there in my parents, and that curbed that. Why I had every opportunity, and I tried so hard to go down the wrong path. But that level of forgiveness that my mom and dad would show me to just push me in the right, I got reprimanded. I got, I got grounded, and everything that we're doing today, that was pretty solid for me. But it was just that consistency of showing up with them and reinforcing that and continually reinforcing that and being so consistent that really helped me to get to each part of my teenage life and keep going. And so high school is when I think I really started to blossom, because I really took a heavy interest in music. I told you they got me that trombone when I was 10. And by the time I was in high school, I got really good at it. And by the time I was a senior, I was first seat, first chair in the Northeast in the US. And that was just an amazing experience for me. And when I graduated from high school, my mom and dad didn't have a lot of money, but they had saved up enough money to send me to the All-American Winds Concert Band. And I was second seat, first chair. We traveled for 21 days to Italy, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Switzerland, and Austria. That was one of the most memorable, amazing trips that I had ever been on in my entire life. And that was back in the late 80s, 1987. So again, it's just them showing up. Doesn't matter what I dealt out for crap, all and what they felt that they may have failed in, and my yearbook, my freshman yearbook, my mom wrote something that I probably should have listened to. And that was, don't go through life worrying about how successful you are. Go through life making the most of your mistakes and learning from them. I was 17 when she wrote that. And so true, that how true that is today as an adult. That when I told you what I wanted on my epitaph was really heavily focused on my mistakes and how I've learned from those mistakes. And it's such a tribute to my parents and how they showed up for me every day.
Man, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing, Dan. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
So your dad and mom, both amazing people, remarkable people, and they really are remarkable and they're amazing. And they had natural children, they had adopted children, but they were all their children. It's love. You said, it's not like they were filthy rich or clean rich, right? I don't know why I said filthy rich, but they made it work. And you grew up learning balance. Now you have this amazing trip in high school and success with the trombone. And you're at a point where in America, we have listeners all over the world, but most Americans, there's a lot of pressure, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It's like, okay, you graduate, now you go to college. So what was your path like and what was that adjustment period? Because having that balance and anchor of loving parents, a lot of people, when they leave to go to college, now everybody has to kind of find themselves in a way. I hate using that term, but stand on their own 2 feet with just God. But sometimes we fall back into old bad habits when we lose those anchors. So talk about that transition from high school to the next step in your life.
Yeah, when I came back from that trip, I thought music was going to be my thing. And so I did go to college. I went to Castleton State College for about a year and a half. And I started learning music theory and struggling to play the piano. And by the time that year and a half was over, I was like, this is not something I want to do. I wasn't happy with it. But the one thing that really stayed with me was computers, because it had helped me to cope. It had helped me to find that balance. Even though I didn't like the music and playing the trombone after that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the teachers and just not clicking with the right teachers. But that having computers was a great thing to have up my sleeve. Thank you to my parents for that. And I eventually just dropped out of college, and I couldn't handle the stress and, just everything that came along with the academic portion of it, the English, the math, which, I'm not really, I'm not excellent at English or excellent at math, but it was hard. It was complicated. And it's almost like I gave up on it, but I always gravitated towards the computers. So I just found myself going back to what I loved. So I dropped out of college and found a job at McDonald's, hated it. After a week, I gave them my 2 weeks notice and said, I'm going to be out here in 2 weeks. I'm surprised they kept me there for the 2 weeks. But there was a an Apple store. It was called Applied Graphics in Rutland, Vermont, that I eventually went to work for. I found that job within that 2 weeks, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And was working with Macintosh, Apple II GSs at the time. So it was amazing. And my parents did get me a computer when I was 10 years old. They got me a Commodore VIC-20. So I was coding on that.
Nice.
Yeah, I was at the college coding on all the Macs and the Digital Equipment Corporation, green bar printer type style computers where it only spit out paper. By
And
the time of
for the list, no, I was just saying for the listeners out there who have no idea what Dan's talking about, check out in the show notes or on the webpage, you go to remarkablepeoplepodcast.com / we'll do Daniel Hall. And when you go there, we'll put a picture of the old computers and printers and reams of paper that Dan's talking about, because we have more power in our cell phones today than NASA had 10 years ago.
Yeah, on their space shuttle. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy, but computers were literally as big as a building back then. And then you got it where it was the size of a massive room. And then, wow, when we got one on our desktop, man, that was freaking revolutionary, right? So that paper, I remember buying boxes of paper and having to carry it. And that's what he's talking about. Like, you have a project in code, it's like you're hand typing every character.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, so keep going, brother.
Yeah, and I got so excited I jumped up and down when I was watching John Wick, because that computer that they're typing on, when they put in that order, it's a Commodore VIC-20.
Yep.
Yeah, and I got so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is what I started writing software on. And I thought that was the coolest thing, man. The coolest thing. And all my kids were like, what's that? That is what has paid for our house. It pays for our running water. It pays for everything that helps us make it from day to day. That's how I started writing computer software.
Where did that take you? Where did that love and that passion, while your mom's at church, you're playing on a computer, they buy you a Commodore at 10 years old, where does all this passion lead?
What a journey. What an absolutely amazing journey. I would, when I was around 25, I got my first real job working at a nuclear power plant in Vermont Yankee.
Next to Homer Simpson, or no? I'm just kidding.
No. Yeah. And sometimes I'd come home glowing. Well, maybe not green, but I'd be glowing because I'd have so much fun, just absolutely loving to, learn more about software, learn more about the applications of software, and how amazing it was to take what I had learned as a young kid and now look at something like creating badging software for a nuclear power plant, where we could print. We had Kodak cameras that were digital floppies, and write software to interact with those cameras, print out a badge for people when they came on site. It was just the fun for me just never stopped. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was my way of fulfilling that kindness. It was a job. I got paid for it, but I felt like I was helping somebody solve a problem. And those chemicals that kick in when you do that, the dopamine, the oxytocin, epinephrine, and serotonin, when all those chemicals kick in, it's just like a high. And it felt like, writing this software for this nuclear power plant, that was such a big high for me. I would go on after Vermont Yankee and work for Goodrich Corporation, which is an aerospace company. And one of the most amazing projects, writing software that will allow Boeing, Airbus, and Goodrich Corporation communicate. And Goodrich Corporation wanted to figure out what their failure rate of their parts were on the aircrafts. So it was really amazing to be able to figure out some complex stuff like that. And then it went into, consulting with BAE and doing some consulting for NIH. And then I settled down into financial services and Kessler Financial Group. And then I got laid off from there. They tried to go after Allianz Corporation for some wrongdoing that they were doing, and they ended up losing the lawsuit. So they told people well in advance that, we're going to have to let some people go because, we just can't financially afford it. So it was an amazing company to work for. And that kind of sent me on a different path of, just starting my own business for a while. And then I started meeting some more amazing people when I worked at Nova Corporation, like Randy Wilson, who's a John Maxwell executive coach, just an amazing guy, just a wealth of knowledge, so down to earth. He reminds me a lot of, and I've never told him this, and he'll probably hear this, he reminds me a lot of my dad, and just how he puts thought into what he says and, before he speaks. And that was so much what my dad was. He would think on things for a while. Sometimes you'd be petrified to hear what was coming out of his mouth because you didn't know if it was good or bad. But Randy reminds me a lot of my dad. And, but I got to work under him, and he's just an amazing leader. He showed kindness. He was always trying to find the best in a person. And Tiffany Roth, I met there too. And we've become lifelong friends, since that was 2012, 2013. And then I moved into TheraManager, now writing just EMR software. So when you go into a hospital and they're taking all your information, scanning your stuff, just being able to write all that stuff. And my boss, Russ Rothschild, amazing guy. He really hones in on seeing the best in all of his employees. And you can't put a price tag on somebody that just wants to raise others up. And he wants to inspire them to see the potential that they have in themselves and not really take credit for it himself. But he is just an amazing soul, the way he runs his business. So we have 21 employees, and it's a small company, but I'll tell you, it's the best company that I've worked for in my life. And I attribute that to, and before Russ, it was Dr. Arnie Schuster who started the company. And Arnie retired and handed things off to Russ, and couldn't have handed it off to a better person. And what I built today with our family, what my wife and I have built, is because of that love and that passion that they have for family. And it's just such an inspiring company to work for, David. And that's really, for me, that's part of that success and part of that journey of being where I'm at, is just being able to find those jobs that I've absolutely loved.
And let's talk about that, because, okay, so we went through the professional journey, and it sounds like you've just had an amazing, great experience of working with and for wonderful people and organizations. Parallel, though, you have that beautiful collage behind you of pictures. So there had to be a woman you met, and there had to be children. So talk through that parallel journey of meeting your wife and the family you've been blessed to bring together.
Absolutely. So I married once to a gal by the name of Deanna, and I have an amazing son that lives in Vermont with her. And he, I left when he was 2 years old. We divorced, still great friends, not because of Ethan, my son, because she's an amazing mom to him, and her and her parents have done a great job of raising him. Now I've been there. He lives in Vermont. I live down in Maryland now, so it gets tough to go back and forth, and we talk on the phone. but I really want to, acknowledge her and Ethan as well. He just graduated top of his class, valedictorian, with, I don't even know how you get a
Wow.
GPA of 4.7, but he is just an amazing young man, and I'm so proud of him.
Send a
And
picture of her. We'll put that in the show notes too. Put a graduation picture in there, and we'll get a picture of your family.
Yeah.
We'll put all that in the show on the website. When I say show notes, there's the Apple or podcast show notes,
Yeah.
but the website has everything. So if you're listening, check out the website. There's a lot more content.
Absolutely, we'll do that. And so after we divorced, it was a couple of years later, I was, I was lonely, man. I was just lonely. I moved down to the DC area, was finding some great jobs, supporting Ethan and his mom. And so I decided to check out eHarmony. And it went through the trial period. And my wife, Tina, was just getting, and this is the ongoing joke, that she didn't have to pay any money for me. She found me on eHarmony, and she was in a trial period. Yeah, so I was like, okay. I keep telling her she was well worth the money. But yeah, we met, we hit it off, and we joke about our first date. And I always tell people that our first date included a date and boots and chains. Everybody's scratching their heads. What's a boots and chains part of it? We were at the aquarium in Baltimore, and she went to lift her leg up over the chain link fence that was there, and she just caught her enough, so it whipped her up into the air, and she came down, tore off one of her fingernails, and
Ouch.
yeah, and we always joke that she fell for me on the first day, and it just, Dave, she has this way of seeing the best in everybody, and she reminds me so much of my mom, and the way that she approaches everything, and the way that she approaches interacting with people, especially our children, and especially with me. I went into our relationship harboring a lot of jealousy because I felt like I married the first time because I didn't think I would amount to anything in life. So that was it for me. And I was so afraid. I loved her so much, and I was so afraid of losing her that the jealousy kicked in, and we almost separated because of it. But she kept on going. And I got that question one day: would you ever consider fostering or adopting? My immediate response was, oh, hell no. I don't ever want to have to parent a child like I was growing up. So that fear of failure was kicking in there as a parent. And she just wasn't taking no for an answer. And she, through her passion, I could see that she loved working with children. And she absolutely took pride in everything that she did. And I saw that. So I relied on her to navigate and help me navigate that process. And she eventually got me to make amends with my dad, my adopted dad, who I had always thought was a hard ass on me my entire life. We had our two little girls, 4 and 8, that are our first placements. And they were severely abused. And I saw through their eyes that first 6 months of having them in our home. I saw myself through their eyes. And it was such a healing thing to see for me. I saw the lying and the stealing, the hoarding of food for the first time. And I'm like, oh my God, is this why I was the way I was because of my foster home? Was this me? And then am I looking at myself through their eyes? And I realized that, I got that glimpse, and my wife said, you need to go and see a therapist and just talk this through. And it was one of the best things I ever did. People say that therapy, it's crazy. But it's really what you make of it. And for me, it was healing to talk to Kate Oliver, who is just amazing. And she was a therapist to our girls, and she was amazing at what she did. Kate Oliver was just amazing. And I ended up talking to her about my son because I was harboring feelings about, leaving my son. And she just helped me through that whole process. So if you take that, we have now 6 kids. And I say 6 adopted special needs kids because we don't really deal, but we manage things like fetal alcohol effects, level 2 autism, the occasional oppositional defiance, the PTSDs, reactive attachment disorder. Now, reactive attachment disorder is what you'll see in what I talked about in the very beginning. A person that has no empathy, lacks cause and effect thinking, and lacks the ability to trust people. And most of your inmates are some medium to severe reactive attachment disorder. So our oldest girl had RAD, and now she was out in and out of our home for a while, just because it became it was a dangerous situation for us to manage those behaviors. But now she's out on her own. She's still working on her, but she's striving. She's moving forward with her life, and I am so proud of her. And I'm so proud of my wife, because there are a lot of times that I wanted to give up and put her back in the system. But my wife would be there, and she would be the one showing up for her. And
That's very, I don't want to say the word ironic, but just like your dad was a disciplinarian, and like you called the hard ass, and your mom was the tender, loving, consistent force, that's kind of how you and your wife ended up. So it's amazing and beautiful.
I think it's the roles are reversed though on that one, man, because she tends to be the disciplinarian, and I'm the lush, or the doormat at times. I get suckered in.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying that you were like saying maybe this isn't working out, and she was like, no, we're staying. But that was her disciplinarian side saying that.
That and she has this amazing. She can wield both sides of it as she needs it. So her passion to be a mom and to be nurturing is amazing, as well as taking on that disciplinarian force if she needs to. And sometimes I need to be disciplined because I'm the biggest kid in the house.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to make it sound like she is a hard ass like my dad. She is, and we only ask, I have to say this because we only ask one thing of our kids: that you respect us as your parents. You don't have to love us. We learned long ago that kids that are traumatized just lack the ability to love. They've never experienced it, or they don't know what that looks like. And especially for our oldest, who are 4 and 8, or their brains have already been shaped and molded. We don't care if they don't love us. We want them to know that we're going to show up every day. And we tell them, look, we only have one goal in life. When we're gone, we want all of you to show up for each other and be there for each other and respect each other. And that is, I couldn't think of any other kindness that they could show to each other than just being there and showing up and supporting each other. Even in school, we don't, you don't have to get A's and B's. Our kids get A's and B's. Not all of them, but they just do it because they love what they're doing, and they found some things that they love to do. So they just tend to get A's and B's. We want you to just try to be just try. And if you can't try, ask for help. We don't care if you get C's. We don't care what your grades are. We just want you to pass and get through school.
So let's do this, if you don't mind. There's a lot of people out there who have always thought of adoption. They've considered it, they prayed about it. There's two major dynamics here. One, what's your advice to people considering adoption? And then two, what's your advice to people considering adoption of a special needs child? Because that's a whole different level of playing. So go through that. Let's try to break that down. What do people need to consider, pray about, prepare?
Absolutely. And I'm going to answer both of them with one most important topic, and that is absolutely knowing, if you're a couple going into this, know what your limitations are as a couple. Know what your limitations are as an individual. And what that looks like is, when you go into fostering and adoption, you're going to lose a lot of your own personal time. Your doctor's appointments, you got court dates, you got a whole myriad of things that you're not even going to dream of having to find the skills to be able to do. And just going into a regular adoption, look, all kids that come into care have been traumatized in some way. So there's some level of attachment issues that you're going to have to deal with. So knowing who you are and knowing how to navigate those scenarios are your strongest coping skills. And if you're going and read about those disorders that you're thinking about taking on, just don't look at a child and say, oh, he is such an amazing looking child. Oh, I would love to get him in our home. You have to dig deeper than just what's on the surface. You have to dig deeper into their trauma. You have to ask questions. You have to know what you're going to have to navigate for that child. And it's not just going in. And I'm so glad, I feel bad for my brothers that they aged out of the system. And I'm so glad that my mom and I just took me, because that's all they could handle. There's lots of times where DSS or social services will come in. Well, we've got 3. Can you take all 3 of them? Because we really don't want to separate them. Say no. If you only can handle 1, say no. Absolutely say no. And don't feel bad about it. There is going to be another home that will be able to take those children and will be able to support them. No doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you know that if you do bring them into your home, you're setting yourself up to damage yourself or even damage the child even further. So absolutely know what your limitations are. I can't stress that enough, as an individual and as a couple. That should carry you over to both of those paths of special needs and just fostering and adoption. And I want to, give our listeners one of the biggest coping skills that we have as parents that have worked for all of our children. When they lay their head down at night, we always ask them the same question: what's tomorrow? And they will respond, it's a new day. And we would say, it's a new day for what? And they'll say, it's a new day to make it the best day ever. So what that means is we take any of the crap, anything that happened, and I could have an off day, or Tina could have an off day. We take that and we leave that, we push that behind. We might still talk about it, but we don't harbor feelings about it. And they know when they lay their head down at night, when they wake up in the morning, hey, buddy, hey, you look amazing today. We start out with those affirmations. And sometimes we joke with the affirmations, what happened to your hair? We'll get the laughter going, but we leave all that stuff behind. You know why? Because my wife is amazing. And she has this way of just forgiving. And if you remember what my mom and dad did, that resonates so much now with me, to be able to just let go and go on to the next day, because it's not even worth it. There's absolutely nothing, unless somebody's harming our children or doing something to harm our well-being. There's really no reason to harbor those feelings. So that's one way to easily reciprocate kindness with your children and show them how to show up for each other and to show up for generations.
So what's life look like for you today? You got your wife, 6 awesome children. What's Dan doing today?
I might make it sound easy, but it's, some days can be a living hell. It can be. And other days, today is an amazing day. We just put our 16-foot water slide up out back for the summer that we got 6 years ago up in Vermont. Went up to place up there. Olivia, our middle daughter, she's 12, had problems with her feet. So to help her build her muscles, we bought this slide. And, it's been the best thing. It's a dry, wet slide. It's an industrial strength. And, so we just set that up. And every time we set it up every year, instead of going to the community pool, they just have so much fun going up and down that. So that's part of what we do to have fun. But still, you have those days that are challenging. And I don't want people to think, Dan's life is just all, rainbows and unicorns. It's for my wife, Tina, it's a full-time job on many realms. Short order cook, taxi driver, maid service, you name it. She is there. And me, I get a vacation every day. When I'm going to work, I get to do what I absolutely love to do, and that's write software. But there's times, especially with autism and fetal alcohol, where they don't know how to manage their regulate their emotions. And one of those could spark another, and then you have 3 or 4 kids just going at it. So I don't want people to think that it's just all rainbows and unicorns. You have to work at it. So for what does Dan have going on today? I continue to work at, being an amazing father. I continue to listen with more than just my ears to what the needs of my family are, and especially my wife, who helps me to navigate all the traumas that are out there that our kids need to have navigated, and she teaches me how to cope with all those. So that's what we have going. That's what our future continues to hold, is just helping our kids navigate their journey from childhood to adulthood.
Yes, and before we talk about the future, I want to ask you this question. One of the things that stood out in our pre-interview conversation, for the listeners, if you don't know, all of our listeners, whether it's through referrals or through LinkedIn or through Podmatch or through our website, or, there's dozens of ways people contact me, and we don't have everybody on the show, right? I want to try to bring you quality content that helps you grow, and we encourage each other. But one of the things that stuck out with Dan is he said, I wouldn't change anything about my past, even the abuse. He's like, because that made me the man I am today. So that really stuck with me. But with that, you might have already discussed it in this episode, or maybe it's something new in the sense of just we haven't discussed it. But if you had one concept, one truth, one word of encouragement to leave with yourself, you go back to your childhood in a time machine and said, Dan, here it is. Here's the advice for yourself at 10 and our listeners. What advice would you have?
Well, I wouldn't change a thing. parenting is probably the most truest form of leadership that we can show our children. And I say that because that complimenting of others, where does that start? That starts at home. Our children learning how to compliment and to show up for each other starts at home. We talked about how my mom showed up for me and just absolutely gave me these affirmations for, all these reams of green bar paper that I brought home. And I just had that sense of gratitude. She taught me how to, have that sense of gratitude for myself and to see inside myself. That is a great leader. That was my parents. And they helped me to continuously learn. And they helped me to navigate the embracement of change. And now you fast forward to where we're at today, and our 6 children and my wife, who my daughter Olivia, she keeps a journal all the time. She's writing all the time. She wants to be a writer. But all of her children are so forgiving. They are so forgiving to each other. They get mad at each other, of course. But I'm so sorry. They'll come back. And sometimes for our kids, it takes them a little while longer to process. But they show up and they forgive each other. They talk about ideas. They read. They want to succeed in their own special way. And if you ever saw a video of our children when we crack open ornaments for Christmas or for any Halloween, it could be anything. Every year, it's just screaming and chaos because it was like they saw everything for the first time. And that form of leadership, I can't stress how important that is to start at home, because that's what saved me. My parents constantly showing up for me and complimenting me and giving me that kindness that I needed to go forward in my life. So no, I absolutely will take that abuse, because that eventually showed me kindness, and that showed me how to endure as an adult and as a parent.
Thank you so much, Dan. So between your birth and today, is there anything else we missed or skipped or that you want to focus in on before we transition to where you're going and how we can help you get there?
There's so many people that have been part of that journey between my brother Jerry and my sisters Julie and Crystal, who've just been so supportive in navigating. I don't think we've missed. I think we've covered quite a bit. And I'm sure once we leave that I'll remember things. Oh man, I wish I had said that. And I wish I had said this, but that's okay. That's for another time, David.
Okay. All right. Then tell us, where's Dan going and how can we help you get there, my friend?
Where I'm going is just sending people a message that you can absolutely take and flip your life around, whether it's through God or whether it's through some amazing people that you find in your life. And I know when we started fostering and adopting, a lot of the friends that we have became non-existent because they didn't understand what we were doing as parents. They didn't understand our children. So we lost a lot of those friendships. And now through LinkedIn, I've managed to find so many amazing people, like Randy Wilson, Dwayne Me Too, Janiyah Iqbal, and Amanda Knight, Travis Lochner, Nick Lozano. Adam Posner, Gabe Leal, Matt Fox, and Dana Fellows. Just some amazing people that I've aligned myself with to, they just advocate for what we're doing, and they understand our journey. And that is just one of the most amazing feelings. It kind of reminds me of my parents, these people and the way that they show up. And so having surrounded myself by these amazing people has, it helps, get past the nuances in life. And I don't see my journey of, having all this wealth. We have everything. We're rich in love. Heck, we won the lottery with our kids. We some people say that they're lucky to have us. We're so fortunate to have them in our lives. So fortunate. They endured so much. And I don't think a lot of people understand that attachment doesn't start when a baby's born. It starts around 5 weeks when their brain is starting to develop. All those cause and effect thinking, the trust, the empathy, that starts inside the womb. And they had such a crappy start in life. And I want to work on surrounding myself with people that will support not only us, but our children as they get older, and their children's children, to become friends, because those are the people that are going to be there when we're gone. And so where Dan is going today, where our family is going today, is we're continuing to show up for each other. There's no master plan for wealth. I rather have my health than have all this money and wealth, because you can get going through life trying to obtain that wealth. And then I've seen people get sick, and then they're spending all their wealth trying to cure that sickness, and they end up dying because they don't have enough money to buy the cure that they need. And that's just not life. That is not life. Seeing my son, who's autistic and has some fetal alcohol, and who has a rare blood disorder, autoimmune disorder, to see him to be able to tap dance for 2 years and watch all these girls on stage just going like this for him. They're clapping for him. And just to see how supportive people are of our family and our children, that's where we're going. Keeping my job, making sure that, we can provide for our family. That's what there is in life. And we're happy. It doesn't have to be any glorious cars or houses, or that's where we're headed, David.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Dan. It's been great having you with on the show and just building a friendship. I think this is just the start of something great. And yeah, when you were talking, there shouldn't be a debate. This is common sense. Even if you're not a believer in God, life begins at conception. And if you don't believe that, most kids have done the experiment with baking soda and vinegar. And when you take baking soda and pour vinegar on it, you have this eruption. It doesn't wait 5 days, 5 months, 5 years. It's instant. And I'm going to be blunt. This will be an explicit episode. Boys have penis, girls have vagina. When the sperm and the egg meets, boom, it's instant. That's the spark of life that God put in us all. So I can help but share that because it was really on my heart when you were talking. And like you said, you love those kids, and it starts from the beginning at conception, that love and that acceptance. And if there's abuse or a rough home and pregnancy, things start. And like you said, fetal alcohol syndrome. I know a great family who adopted a young man, and his mom was a crack addict and alcoholic, and he came out with real problems, and he's in his 30s today and he still had real problems, but he functions as an adult in society. And it's amazing because this kid should have been institutionalized, but they just poured love into him and was tolerant and not tolerant. Like you said, they were there each day. They showed up each day, started new each day. So everything you said, Dan, it's just beautiful and great. And you were helped and loved, and your children are being helped and loved. And we all just need to love God and love each other. So thank you for being here today, my friend. You truly are a remarkable guy.
I appreciate that. And for anybody that's listening, thank you so much for taking time out of your life to hear our story. That's priceless.
Yes, yes. And if someone wants to reach you, I will put links in the show notes, of course, on, in the podcast directory and on the website, but just audibly, what's the best way for someone to reach you?
Most definitely LinkedIn.
Okay. So,
yeah.
Is it, what were you going to say, brother?
No, it's, most definitely on LinkedIn. And I'm very responsive to any messages that I get on there.
Okay. Awesome. And then if you have any problems reaching in, if you're not a LinkedIn user for some reason, you can reach out to me and I'll connect you to. But Dan, thank you for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Stick around another moment. We're going to have a special offer from our sponsors. And to everyone, we love you. Have a great day. And like our slogan says, don't just listen to great content like this, but do it, apply it. Repeat it each day consistently so you can have a great life in this world and an eternity to come. I'm David Pasqualone. That was Mr. Dan Hall. Thanks for listening to Remarkable People Podcast. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life.